So you're thinking about moving to North Georgia. Welcome to the club. I've got a lot of people calling me, asking me questions about moving to different parts of North Georgia. So join us. I've lived in North Georgia for the past 23 years or so and have made videos on various different towns in the area. And so I thought, hey, why don't we just make one video to rule them all? The ultimate guide to living in North Georgia. In this video, I'll be talking about places to live, things to do, amenities, so much more. So stick around and watch the show. Hope you enjoy. Hey everybody, my name is Tim Gibson and my channel is all about living in North Georgia. Please subscribe if you haven't already because I know you love these videos. If you are thinking about moving to the area, of course, reach out. My info is on the screen here. So let's jump into the ultimate guide to living in North Georgia. What are the basics of living in North Georgia? Let's start with just some general information here. When I'm talking about North Georgia, I'm talking roughly about an hour drive time north of Atlanta all the way up to the Tennessee border. Now, North Georgia is massive. So we're talking about the area from all the way over on the border of northern Alabama to North Carolina, South Carolina. So it covers a huge area, but specifically I'm talking about that area just about an hour north of Atlanta. What is North Georgia known for? North Georgia is also rural. And also it's known for the mountains, of course, lakes, rivers, and a lot of outdoor activities. We'll go into more detail a little bit later, but this is the main reasons why people want to move to North Georgia, but we're gonna dive into each one of these a little bit more deeply a little later in the video. North Georgia geographically is also close to a number of medium to large cities. We're talking, of course, Atlanta, Georgia, Chattanooga, Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee, Knoxville, Tennessee, Birmingham, Alabama, Columbia, South Carolina. So naturally you can see that people can drive to North Georgia relatively quickly from some of these larger towns. So we can talk about population of some of these towns. For the most part, a lot of the towns in North Georgia are going to be 10,000 or less people inside the city limits. Of course, that is a draw for a lot of people. For example, Dahlonega is about 7,000 people. LJ is about 2,000 people. And on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, you have Gainesville, Georgia. And Gainesville is its own metro area, so to speak. It's about 45 minutes to an hour outside of Atlanta. And it has a population of about 42,000 people. But just know that's an outlier for North Georgia. Most of these towns are very, very small and very rural. That being said, there is a lot of growth in North Georgia, especially in places like Dawsonville is just on the outside of Cumming, Georgia, which is basically like the end of the suburbs of Atlanta. And Dawsonville is the next frontier, I guess is what you'd say. There is a major artery that runs north and south from Atlanta to the North Georgia mountains called Georgia 400. And Dawsonville is right there on Georgia 400. And there's explosive growth happening there right now. With the ease of getting down Georgia 400, you can get to Atlanta in about an hour drive time, so you can see the natural progression there of the suburbs, people wanting to move out. There's also a lot of development happening in places like Blue Ridge, Georgia, which is about an hour and a half outside Atlanta. That's growing for different reasons, mostly because of the tourism and the natural beauty of a place like Blue Ridge. Lots of mountains, lots of cabins, lots of great stuff to do up there. Amenities. Are there things to do and places to shop and places to go to the doctor in North Georgia? Are there paved roads? Or do we get around on horseback? No, we don't go around on horseback. Some people do, but we do drive cars up in North Georgia and we do have paved roads. With these towns being pretty small, North Georgia is going to be a good bit different than that. You may have to drive 10-15 minutes to get to a grocery store or longer depending on where you are. Shopping and retail, restaurants. What I love about North Georgia, one of my favorite things, is that there are so many little local restaurants that you can visit. Not as many chains. You know, you do have your fast food chains and everything, but you're not going to have a lot of the chains that you do in bigger cities or the suburbs. So lots of cool places to try. It's really just no end of places to try as far as restaurants go. Shopping, like clothes shopping and things like that. If you got Amazon, you can buy anything. If you got the internet, really, you can buy anything. But there are shopping centers that are relatively close by depending on where you're living. Like Dawsonville, Georgia, for example, has the North Georgia Premium Outlets, which has everything from Old Navy all the way up to luxury stores like Gucci and Prada. For all you people that wear those fancy clothes, which is not me, as you can tell, but hey, there's something for everyone there. Hospitals and healthcare, I know, is going to be another major consideration if you're thinking about moving to an area that's rural. So I just did this research for someone who was thinking about moving to North Georgia. And generally each county, I did research on Gilmer County, Union County, Towns County, Lumpkin County, some of those others. And for the most part, each one has its own hospital. Now, these aren't massive high-rise hospitals with 1,000 beds or anything. You do have access to healthcare in some of these places. I'm going to list this as an amenity because it's one of my favorite parts of living in North Georgia, and it's the slower pace of life. North Georgia is a really peaceful place to live. It's really quiet, it's peaceful. It's a nice place. And slower pace of life, if you want to get out of the rat race and you want to get away from the craziness of living in the suburbs or in a large city, if you have the ability to do so, I highly recommend it. Especially if you can work remotely. So that's a big deal. Of course, nobody wants to drive in Atlanta traffic if you're commuting from Blue Ridge, Georgia, hour-and-a-half drive without traffic and then include Atlanta traffic. Of course, you don't want to do that. But if you have the ability to work remotely, then why wouldn't you live in an amazing place, a beautiful place, and work from home overlooking the mountains or something like that? The answer to that question is the internet. For the most part, North Georgia does have some high-speed internet, but it's patchy in places. You could have one section of town that's got a really fast connection, and then just 10 minutes away, you might be on dial-up. That's definitely something you'd want to consider, especially if you're thinking about working remotely. Definitely check your internet connection before you decide to buy a house in North Georgia. I know you may be thinking this is 2022 and everyone should have a lightning fast internet connection. And hey, I agree with you, but do not make a move to North Georgia without checking the internet connection first. Now you may be thinking, if I live in a place like North Georgia, how are you going to occupy your time if you live in North Georgia? Let's jump into some of the things that you can do. There's actually quite a lot of things to do. First and foremost, being in North Georgia, you have no shortage of things to do outdoors. There are tons of lakes. To name a few, there's Lake Lanier, Lake Hartwell, Lake Rabun, Lake Burton, and about 4 or 5 others that I can't think of off the top of my head. Being close to water is a great thing, and having the ability to get out in the water, do some kayaking, fishing, boating, water skiing, all that stuff. There's plenty of lakes in North Georgia to enjoy. And real quick, back to Lake Lanier. If you don't want to buy a boat, if you don't want to own a boat, you don't want to deal with the hassle of owning a boat, there's a really cool service called Freedom Boat Club. This is not an ad, by the way. And you say, hey, I want a fishing boat this weekend. You pick up your fishing boat, it's gassed up, ready to go. You go fish, bring it back to the marina, and you're done. You don't have to worry about the rest of it. It's a pretty cool service. I don't think it's available on some of these other lakes in North Georgia, but I know it's available on Lake Lanier. But of course, if you have your own boat, take it to one of these other awesome lakes. The major reason why I talk about the outdoors and things to do outdoors in North Georgia is because the Chattahoochee-Oconee National Forest covers somewhere around 866,000 acres. Of course, that is a massive area, and that is basically untouched wilderness in some regards. So when I say you can go hiking, you can go packing, camping, you can do all this stuff, it's such a huge area that there's really just no shortage of things to do if you love to be outdoors. So lots of beautiful rivers in North Georgia as well. Just to name a few, you've got the Towa River, you've got Etowah River, you've got the Chestatee River and the Chattahoochee River. And of course, there's more than that. If you live in a place like, I don't know, like Dahlonega, and you wanted to go spend some time on the river or just get away, you can do that, and you can get to the Chestatee River in no time, and it's right there at the end of Georgia 400. You could go tubing, you can just go hang out and splash around in the river in the summertime. That's not uncommon because there are rivers all over the place in North Georgia. A lot of people go whitewater rafting, there's trout fishing. Of course, there's hiking. The Appalachian Trail runs through North Georgia. No shortage of things to do. Another thing I wanted to mention too is 11 state parks in the North Georgia mountains, each with its own unique. And I think there's about 11 state parks in North Georgia, and they're each amazing in their own regard. I've probably been to about 5 or 6 of them. A lot of these places have cabins where you can rent a cabin for a couple days and you get to spend some time in the mountains. It's another great way to see the area. Let's jump to some events. Now, of course, it's going to be really hard to give you every single event in every town and entire area like North Georgia. But what I'll do is give you some just off the top of my head. You've got attractions in the fall, especially like Bert's Pumpkin Farm in Dawsonville. You've got apple picking in Ellijay. Throughout North Georgia, and most of it is concentrated in Dahlonega. You also have a lot of vineyards and wineries. Most of them are concentrated in Dahlonega, but there are wineries across North Georgia. Another major attraction in the area. You've got a lot of events in the fall too. Specifically, you've got the Cumming Fair, which is huge, and you have Gold Rush in Dahlonega. You've got events at Christmas time, farmers markets. Each town has its own unique, really fun stuff to do. So I can't cover all of them in this video. This would be about a 2-hour long video if I were to cover every event in every town in North Georgia. But hopefully you get the gist and you can understand that there's just no shortage of things to do. And it's not just people sitting in their cabins just twiddling their thumbs wishing they had something to do. I've mentioned this in some of my other videos too, but proximity to Atlanta is another major factor. A lot of people that live in North Georgia, of course, don't want to live in a major city of about 10 million in metro Atlanta, but having access to a place like Atlanta is important. A lot of people love to go to Atlanta for the sporting events. You've got the Atlanta Braves, which are the Major League Baseball team, the Atlanta Hawks, which are an NBA team. The Atlanta Falcons are in the NFL. Also, you have Atlanta United, which is the soccer team, Major League Soccer team. The Atlanta United and the Atlanta Falcons both play in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which is just this massive, like state-of-the-art spaceship-looking stadium. There's also major sporting events like the college football playoff, and the national championship happens in Atlanta from time to time for college football. And of course, you've got other major events that happen in a lot of these venues, lots of concerts. I think Chris Stapleton is coming up in Mercedes-Benz Stadium soon. Last year, I took 2 of my kids to see 21 Pilots in State Farm Arena. And that same night, whenever we were seeing 21 Pilots next door in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, Metallica was playing. So you have all of these major concerts that come through Atlanta on a regular basis. Naturally, if you live in North Georgia, you can get down to Atlanta pretty quick, within an hour and a half, and see one of your favorite bands or artists that come through town. So that's a big draw. So I guess what's exciting about that, or a cool thing about that, is that you can live somewhere that's rural, but it's not like you're 4 to 6 hours away from a major city. You're an hour, hour and a half away from a major city. Other thing I wanted to mention too is on the south side of Atlanta, you have Atlanta Hartsfield Airport. And that is, last I heard, I've heard this over the years, supposedly the busiest airport in the world. And I did travel for a living for about 20 years before I got into real estate. And yes, it is a massive airport and it's really busy. And you can get just about anywhere in the world from Atlanta. It's a major airport. So that's another reason why there's a draw for living within an hour and a half of Atlanta, but you also have access to a major airport. North Georgia is also very close to a lot of great colleges. Of course, you have the University of Georgia in Athens. You have Georgia Tech in Atlanta. You got Georgia State in Atlanta, Emory University in Atlanta. You also have University of North Georgia in Dahlonega and Kennesaw State in Kennesaw. All of those are great places to study and offer different things. All of those are, of course, great places to study for different reasons. But as you can see, just from me naming off a few, and I'm sure I probably missed a couple, you have lots of great places to study, no shortage of education opportunities close to North Georgia. A lot of college students take advantage of these opportunities to save a ton on in-state tuition. That's another great opportunity for those people who want to live in North Georgia and have a very reasonable way to save some money on college tuition. Okay, last but not least, let's jump into real estate, which of course is my favorite thing to talk about. Like I mentioned, a lot of the reason why people choose to live in North Georgia is the proximity to Atlanta. You have relatively easy access to a metro area of around 10 million people in population, but you also have that small town rural feel. You also, of course, like I mentioned just a few minutes ago, you got access to one of the busiest airports in the world. A lot of other medium-sized cities that are close by, Chattanooga, Birmingham, and a couple others like I mentioned earlier. Of course, it's quiet and peaceful. It's a slower pace of life. People want to get out of the rat race and get away from the suburbs and the craziness and the strip malls and all that stuff and traffic. So some people choose to move to North Georgia and live there full time, or others choose to have a vacation home to get away on the weekends or holidays. And geographically, it's so different. I mean, Atlanta does have hills and it's not just completely flat, but just like I said, it's about an hour drive, but you have the ability to get to the mountains and it's just quiet and peaceful. Like I mentioned, the Chattahoochee National Forest is somewhere around 900,000 acres of just wilderness. So it's kind of gaining steam, is a great place to live. So let's jump into some stats to illustrate what I'm talking about from a real estate perspective. First and foremost, the average home prices in some of these towns is relatively low, especially compared to Metro Atlanta and other areas that are close to large cities in the rest of the country. What we're seeing here on this chart is you're looking in about the 300 to 500 range on average. Of course, you could be lower or higher than that depending on what type of house you buy. But that'll just give you an idea of the general average you could expect to pay in the area. If you think about metro areas that have roughly 10 million people, someplace like LA or San Francisco or Seattle or New York, Chicago. And if you were to drive an hour outside of those areas, I would imagine that it would be a little bit more expensive to live close to one of those other cities than it is to Atlanta. I get people calling from some of these areas all the time, and a lot of them are surprised at how much house you can buy for them in these areas in North Georgia. Another factor that I always like to bring up is days on market. That just gives you a snapshot of the current market conditions. Like the average sale price, we just pulled a selection of North Georgia counties to give you an idea of what to expect. This chart starts in 2019 and gives us a snapshot of the crazy seller's market. As you can see, this chart dives down, which is a shorter days on market, which means houses were flying off the shelves. And this was happening across the country. But as you can see here, it's kind of creeping back up at the end of the chart here. And you're looking at somewhere around 3 weeks on market is average now, when a year ago it was 5 days. So take that into consideration. The market is changing across the country with inflation and high interest rates. But real estate is a cycle, and it affects every area a little bit differently. And longer days on market is a good thing, especially if you're looking to buy, because you may have a little bit more leverage. But each market is different and each town is different, and that's why it's important for you to have a local real estate agent who can help you navigate all of that good stuff, all that data. So if you're thinking about moving to North Georgia, give me a call. I would be more than happy to help you. All right, leave me some thoughts in the comments, ask some questions. I'd be happy to help. Of course, you can check out some of my other videos that outline some of these towns specifically. Have a great day, and we'll see you on the next video.